Welcome back. A quick reminder, this is Wake Up Sierra Leone on AYV television and radio here in Freetown. Now, the United Nations says more than 80% of global trade is transported by sea. In 2024 alone, nearly 13 billion tons of goods moved across the world's oceans, according to the World Bank.
Yet the people who make this possible are rarely seen. Today is the International Day of the Seafarer, an occasion established by the International Maritime Organization to honor the millions of men and women who keep global commerce moving. For Sierra Leone, the day carries special significance.
With a coastline stretching nearly 500 kilometers and an economy heavily dependent on imports and exports passing through its ports, the sea is more than geography. It is an economic lifeline, and at the center of it all are seafarers. AYV Yero Jalo tells us more.
The sea has no memory, it remembers no names, yet every day millions of seafarers write their stories upon it. They are the invisible workforce of globalization, the hands that move the world, the people who ensure that supermarket shelves are stocked, factories are supplied, and economies remain connected. But life at sea is often lonely, months away from family, long working hours, dangerous conditions, and increasingly complex security challenges. International labor groups say thousands of seafarers globally still face abandonment, delayed wages, and poor welfare conditions. For many, the ocean provides a living, but it also demands sacrifice. In Sierra Leone, maritime stakeholders say the country has enormous potential. The nation's ports remain gateways to trade and economic growth. Officials believe investing in maritime education could create opportunities for young people and strengthen the country's participation in the blue economy. They further emphasize on the significance of the day, while noting contribution made over the years.
The International Day for Seafarers in the maritime industry is very important because we are all very aware that 90% of global trade is being carried out by maritime. So basically this year's theme, according to IMO, is carrying world trade, carrying the risk. We are all very well aware of what is currently happening in the Strait of Hormuz, where most of our seafarers have been trapped in conflict zones. They also carry mental health pressures, mental health issues. Because imagine being on board vessel for 3-4 months, you have family issues back home, they carry that kind of pressure. So that is why it was very expedient by the management led by Dr. Daniel Kaitibi to create a department for research, maritime education and training that is to carry both the trade and the responsibility of our seafarers. At the moment, we cannot put a number to that because we are currently working with the Sierra Leone Seafarers Union to create a database. Everybody just go helter skelter to get job uncoordinatedly, you know. And again, the other one is their welfare. You know, there's another convention that calls the Maritime Labour Convention (MLC) that speaks on the welfare of seafarers. You know, that is isolation, fatigue, and health issue at sea. It's also a challenge. One is their welfare. You know, there's another convention that calls the Maritime Labour Convention (MLC) that speaks on the welfare of seafarers. You know, that is isolation, fatigue, and health issue at sea. It's also a challenge. But as I said, that is why this Department 21, you know, as a country, we have to domesticate the STCW, that is the Standard Training Certification for Watchkeepers Convention. By domesticating it, it means we took it to Parliament, and Parliament has to rectify it, and it is now part of our laws that anybody that wants to go on board a vessel must do the basic requirement that must get the basic requirement that is required for you to get on board those vessels. So it is now part of our law. So as an administration, you know, we now enforce that anybody that the thing is, we all working towards safety of life at sea. That's what we work. The central focus of the maritime industry is the safety of life at sea. That is there is a convention called SOLAS. There's another convention called MAPOL, Maritime Environmental Pollution. There is a convention called the Maritime Labour Convention and the STCW. But all is geared towards safety of life at sea. What we do is to train people that go on board vessel as to how to use the use of those equipments on board the vessels. Say for instance, if there's a distress call, how to use your life jacket, how to use your passenger raft, how to do man overboard. So these are the things we do, to create safety of life at sea. So in enforcement of that, we've domesticated the STCW convention. So it's not part of our laws as an administration. Like I said, all thanks to the executive management, for pushing these domestication at the Sierra Leone Parliament.
For the seafarers themselves, the profession is both adventure and endurance. The sea can be generous and it can be unforgiving. These seafarers describe their work as a calling that requires resilience, discipline, and deep personal sacrifice.
There are lots of challenges out there. The sea is not meant for the human being. So most times when we're out at sea, some of my colleagues get seasick. The challenges of sea state. Sometimes the sea is turbulent, especially in the rainy season. So yes, there are lots of challenges out there. Because being in the Navy is not only a job, it's an adventure. Being out there, out at sea is indeed an adventure. I think we need to ensure we educate our people about the maritime domain. 90% of the world's trade is by sea, transport by sea. So most of the commodities we receive on land come by sea. So I think if the maritime domain awareness is there in the nation, prosperity, livelihood, and a lot of other maybe even social amenities we get in the sea. So the sea is of great importance to every nation. So it is a blessing that as a nation, Sierra Leone, we find ourselves a coastal nation. I always say is the military generally is the best job in the world. So coming to the Navy is an additional advantage to your career in the military. But coming to the Navy is not only a job, but it's also an adventure. So military is the best job in the world. So encourage everybody to join the military.
This day is set to recognize the significant role seafarers play globally. They leave their family for weeks, days, or months.
There is an old maritime saying goes, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. For generations, seafarers have navigated storms, wars, and global disruptions. Yet their mission has remained unchallenged to keep the world connected. As Sierra Leone joined the international community in marking the International Day of the Seafarers, the message is that seafarers, men and women, are more than workers, but guardians of supply chains. Yero Jallo, AYV News Freetown.
Many thanks to Yero Jallo for that report. Now we return to the main studio and continue the conversation where child marriage still is making headlines, stealing childhood of its victims. It cuts short education, deepens poverty, and exposes girls to violence, early pregnancy, and lifelong health risks. According to UNICEF, more than 640 million women and girls alive today were married before their 18th birthday, while around 12 million girls are still married each year.
Well, in Sierra Leone, despite decades of advocacy, the practice has remained deeply rooted. Human Rights Watch estimates that nearly 3 in every 10 girls are married before the age 18, with the numbers even higher in some rural communities. Last year, Parliament passed the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2024, criminalizing child marriage in every circumstances and making Sierra Leone one of the few African countries with one of the continent's strongest legal protection for children. Last week Friday, the law was tested in the High Court of Sierra Leone for the first time. 4 men appeared before Justice Wakeup over an alleged marriage of a 17-year-old girl. AYV's court correspondent Ibrahim Ramadan Jallo was in court.
The High Court in Freetown has remanded Sayo Mara, Lansana Kura, Saliu Kamara, and Abubakar Kamara in connection with offences under the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2024. According to the indictment, the first accused, Sayo Mara, is charged with 1 count contracting marriage of a child contrary to Section 2 of the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2024, Act number 5 of 2024. The particulars of offence state that on the 17th of June 2026 at Crafton Village in the Western Rural District of Sierra Leone, the accused allegedly contracted marriage with a child. The accused, however, pleaded not guilty to the charge. Saliu Kamara, the father of the child, is charged with 1 count for allegedly consenting to the marriage contrary to Section 3 of the Act. The particulars are that on the same date and location, the accused have our underage daughter in marriage. He pleaded guilty to consenting to the child marriage. In addition, Lentena Kura and Abubakar Kamara were also charged with aiding and abetting child marriage contrary to Section 10 of the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act 2024. Both accused persons also pleaded guilty. Presiding over the matter, Justice Wakeup noted that the accused persons were not represented by legal counsel, but indicated their intention to hire lawyers. The judge therefore ordered that they be remanded in custody. The matter has been adjourned to the 2nd of July 2026 for another hearing to allow the defendants to secure legal representation and further proceedings. The case.
Well, many thanks to Jallo for that report. While the country's judiciary was tested last week Friday, the Regional ECOWAS Court of Justice in Abuja, Nigeria, delivered a judgment involving an 11-year-old Sierra Leonean girl who was filed in 2024 by the Institute for Human Rights and Development in Africa and Advocate Limited. It found that Sierra Leone failed to take adequate measures to prevent and eliminate child marriage and to effectively protect the minor in the case and other girls from the practice.
Well, the ruling said that child marriage constituted a form of gender-based violence and found that Sierra Leone failed in its obligations to properly investigate the child marriage of the minor. This morning, to discuss all this and more in the studios, we have Ms. Juliet Hughes, Legal Manager Advocate, and Albert Daniel Bau, Deputy Director and Acting Head of Children's Affairs, Directorate, Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Willetta, let's start with you. This is quite a situation for Sierra Leone when you juxtapose both cases. Way back to 2024, the ruling and the progress Sierra Leone got to make with the Child Marriage Act and the ruling that was passed on Friday. What does this say about Sierra Leone's journey in protecting girls?
Thank you very much, Fabian. I think it's a huge milestone for us. Firstly, just seeing how the perpetrators of child marriages are now being prosecuted, and from Friday we see that these 4 men have taken a plea. It's not one that I would delve into because it's a matter that's still before the court. However, it shows that great impact. We've come a long way, and there has been a huge shift, not just within Sierra Leone, but this is a huge shift in terms of the protection of girls for all across West Africa and Africa as a whole. When you look at the ECOWAS court judgment, there are a number of issues that it brings to light. Firstly, the fact that child marriage is a form of gender-based violence, and as such, government has an obligation to ensure that these child marriages are not repeated or they're not happening anymore. And we can see that steps have been taken by Sierra Leone, and that sends a huge message to the rest of Africa, where women and girls are suffering as a result of child marriage and gender-based violence. We also see that through this particular judgment, one of the issues that advocate continually speaks about is the fact that gender-based violence is a contributing factor to women actually coming into contact with the law. And this minor's case is a clear example. At age 11, she was forced into child marriage, she was abused sexually, emotionally, mentally. All of that had great impact on her well-being as a child and her development and growth. And during that process, she came into contact with the law. In fact, she fled from the alleged marriage. She ran away, her family took her back because she was a form of economic security. And this is something that we see on a regular basis across Africa. So it's not just a Sierra Leone issue. But we have indeed come a long way, considering the fact that the Prohibition of Child Marriage Act is now being implemented, even though it came after we had already filed a case before the court. But it shows the dedication to ensure that girls are being protected. So I think it's a huge milestone for all of us.
Albert, from the ministry's perspective, we do have laws, we do have some of these cases emerge on social media on and off. It seems there has been some sort of awareness raising across the country to understand the consequences and repercussions of child marriage. Yet, there are still people who boldly and willingly disregard the law and just go about what they think should be done, regardless of how it affects the girls. Why do you think this is still happening?
Yes, this is happening. Thank you very much. And that is why the advocacy continues to create awareness, more especially in vulnerable communities. So because of lack of awareness and illiteracy in most of those vulnerable, more especially in hard-to-reach areas, they don't understand about the laws. So they just take decisions abusing children at all levels, ranging from child marriage, teenage pregnancy, abuse, and exploitation, which is really contrary to the Prohibition of the Child Marriage Act and that of the newly enacted Child Rights Act of 2025. So that is why the ministry, in collaboration with child protection actors and other MDAs, we're working to ensure that we actually implement all of these laws in hard-to-reach areas where most of these cases are put under the carpet. And most times, the local stakeholders compromise these issues. So from the perspective of the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs, in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Welfare and other child protection actors from the development partners ring and other MDAs, we have already developed regulations to enhance the effective implementation of this Prohibition of the Child Marriage Act and also the Child Rights Act, so that the layman there will have to understand that the penalties involved will actually give a critical condition within that community. So that is why we want everybody to understand and ensure that the law is already and always implemented at all the time, so that whosoever found guilty will not go scot-free.
We'll get to the law in a moment. The leadership of your ministry, the minister, brought out a very significant point not long ago, calling on the media and the bloggers, though they help with sort of drawing the ministry's attention and the entire country's attention to cases that emerge, but she's also raising concerns as to how these stories are covered, exposing the victims. Would you want to use this moment to give clarity to that? The role of the media and bloggers, of course, media goes beyond just the mainstream media, and the bloggers in this fight.
Yeah, the role of the media is critical, more especially the bloggers, because they don't understand the guiding principles. If you understand the guiding principles in child protection, definitely you have to ensure that confidentiality is critical, because most times it exposes the children to discrimination, to stigma. So that is why when